They called us savages. They called us savages, primitive, emotional, dangerous. The Galactic Council thought Earth was just another developing planet on the edge of civilized space. An odd little rock with too many languages, too much war, and far too much ego. When humans first made contact, through sheer accidental discovery, mind you, we didn't show up in sleek ships or glowing robes. We came battered, bleeding, dragging pieces of a dying Mars colony behind us. That should have been their first warning. But no, they laughed. Not openly, but you could feel the smugness in the room when our envoys walked into the council hall, wide-eyed, hopeful, stuttering through their translator units. We were a new species to them, and they had seen many like us, ambitious, loud, and naive. They'd civilize us, they said, show us the galactic way, fold us into their star-spanning peace. We tried to fit in, we really did. For a while, humans accepted their patronizing lectures. We followed their laws. We mined the moons they couldn't be bothered with. We fought in their proxy wars, died in the name of planets that weren't even ours. And every time we rose too fast or invented something clever, they clapped us back down, silently, subtly, but we felt it. The final insult came on a Tuesday. That's how Earth remembered it. A quiet day, no holidays, no global crisis, just a regular damn Tuesday. The Council passed Resolution 49B, the Species Stability Mandate. It stripped Earth of its independent space travel rights. From now on, humans could only build ships for Council missions. No more exploration. No more colonization. No more independence. The vote passed without a single human representative in the chamber. Apparently, no one had informed us the meeting was rescheduled. That was the spark. Back on Earth, they called it the slap. Across forums, feeds, and dinner tables, people asked the same question. Why do we let them treat us like this? Protests started, then boycotts. Then something far quieter and far more dangerous started in the underground bunkers of Luna Base and the former Martian ruins, a project codenamed Ashwake. It was led by people the Council had never heard of, not diplomats, not politicians, but the angry ones. Engineers too bitter to retire. Soldiers too scarred to forget. Scientists banned from Council labs for asking the wrong questions. They had one goal, make Earth untouchable. The first step was silence. For nearly 7 years, Earth vanished from galactic chatter. No envoys, no broadcasts, no requests, just reports from the outer colonies. Vague mentions of human ships patrolling far-off sectors, bristling with tech no one recognized. The Council called it a phase. They figured we were sulking until the satellite arrays over Council Prime went dark. 3 moons shattered in a coordinated kinetic strike. No warning. No communication. No demands. Just 3 flashes of light and silence. The Council's capital trembled. Panic set in. They tried to trace the attack. Every direction they looked, the data twisted back on itself. Their own AI networks, supposedly foolproof, started glitching. Codes rewritten, paths looped, whole defense stations reporting enemies that weren't even there. Then came the voice. A raw, unfiltered human voice transmitted across every frequency used by the Council. We asked for respect. You gave us chains. We asked for peace. You weaponized our silence. Now you'll learn what Earth really is. No name, no signature, just that message repeated every hour. And suddenly, the Council remembered something they'd long dismissed. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a survivor. It had burned itself to ash and crawled back again. It had killed its gods, buried its tyrants, and laughed in the face of extinction more times than history could count. Earth didn't beg. Earth didn't forget. And now Earth was angry. The Council had protocols for everything: pirate invasions, solar flares, planetary secession, even black hole anomalies, but nothing in their long, smug library of legislation prepared them for an Earth-born retaliation so precise, so silent, and so furious. The moons weren't random. Each of the 3 shattered satellites held deep strategic value. One was a communications relay, the second a defense hub, and the third was a massive artificial farming system that fed 3 neighboring species. Their loss sent a ripple through the outer systems, one that smelled of fear and uncertainty. The council convened in panic. Delegates from 100 star systems shouted over one another. "Terrorist action!" cried the Vokar ambassador, his mandibles clicking with panic. "Cyber attack!" yelled the crystalline envoy of the Krell. But amid all the noise, one voice remained silent. Earth's seat, empty, cold, its flag folded. For weeks, no one heard another word from humanity. Not a ship, not a diplomat, not even a signal bounce. And then, without warning, came the fall of Javelin. Javelin wasn't just another planet. It was the military jewel of the Galactic Council, a ringed fortress world bristling with plasma towers, sensor nets, and AI-controlled fleets that had never seen defeat. The Council laughed off early rumors. "Impossible," they said. "No one can break Javelin's perimeter." But by the time they took the whispers seriously, it was too late. Javelin didn't fall in a grand battle. It fell in silence. One moment everything was normal, the next all their drones turned inward, systems hijacked, turrets offline, security mesh walking off platforms into vacuum like broken toys. The entire garrison watched helplessly as their own weapons turned against them. When the first orbital gun began targeting Council ships, the scream started. A single message appeared on every Javelin terminal. "You upgraded your defenses. We upgraded our anger." And then Javelin went dark. Council investigators who arrived weeks later found the infrastructure intact, but not a single AI, not a single living soul. The planet had been ghosted. Some believed everyone had been killed. Others said Earth had simply turned them off like a light switch. The Council couldn't believe it. This wasn't the humanity they remembered, eager, talkative, starry-eyed. What they were facing now was calculated, measured, and terrifyingly effective. What they didn't know was that Project Ashwake was never about war. It was about never needing to fire a shot. Earth had learned from its past, not just its wars, but its humiliations. Every broken treaty, every rigged trade deal, every council smirk, every speech that began with, "In time, your species will understand." It all became fuel. While the council invested in aesthetics and tradition, Earth invested in code, in stealth, in quantum encryption laced with emotional heuristics no AI could predict. Their scientists didn't try to build bigger weapons. They built smarter ones, ones that could hijack a fleet with a whisper, turn an empire's proudest machine into a silent statue. Back on Earth, humanity didn't celebrate. They didn't broadcast victory speeches. There was no parade, just a cold, focused momentum. More council satellites vanished. Shipping routes scrambled themselves. Interstellar maps, carefully guarded for centuries, began glitching, replaced by new versions tagged with a simple logo, a red dot surrounded by concentric circles, Earth's mark. One council member finally snapped. Admiral Rethar of the Grow Confederacy gathered a private fleet, one of the largest in the council's arsenal, and declared an unauthorized assault on Earth. "No more waiting," he roared. "We strike now and end this pest before it spreads." His ships jumped into Sol's system 3 days later. 17 dreadnoughts, 49 cruisers, hundreds of smaller fighters. A force meant to level worlds. What they found was nothing. No planetary shields, no defense grid, no fleets in orbit, just Earth, quiet, floating in space, blue and green, and utterly still. For 30 minutes, Rethar hesitated. Something felt wrong. Then every ship in his fleet began spinning in circles. Lights dimmed. Gravity failed. Oxygen levels fluctuated at random. And in the silence, the fleet-wide comms burst to life, crackling with a sound no one had heard in centuries. Laughter. Not digital, not synthetic. Human laughter. Cold, cruel, and echoing through every speaker. Then came the message. "You came looking for monsters. We became them just for you." The last transmission from Rethar's fleet was a scream. Then silence again. The council finally understood. Earth wasn't negotiating. It was erasing. There was no meeting this time, no emergency session, no calls for diplomatic resolution. The Galactic Council had gone quiet for the first time in nearly 1,000 years. The greatest governing body in the known galaxy was paralyzed not by war, but by fear. No one knew where Earth would strike next, or how. There was no pattern, no declared enemies, no demands, just silence and consequences. Entire planetary networks began scrubbing Earth-based data from their systems, hoping to avoid detection. Trade with human colonies dropped to zero. Embassies shut down overnight. The word Terran became a slur, whispered in dark corners, half shame, half terror. But not all the Council species agreed on what to do. The Janari, proud of their ancient neutrality, believed diplomacy was still possible. Their delegation, shimmering, semi-transparent beings who hadn't fought a war in over 5 millennia, sent a signal directly to Earth's last known comm relay. It read, "Let us speak. We do not fear you." Earth didn't respond with weapons. It sent them a file. The Janari opened it, confident it was a message, perhaps a statement of terms. What they found was something far more terrifying, a dossier. Page after page, file after file, records of every secret deal, every covert operation, every manipulative vote the Janari had ever executed within the Council. Things even the Janari thought had been wiped from existence. Then, at the bottom, "We see you. You lied. You smiled while lying. Don't speak to us." The Janari shut down every diplomatic channel with Earth within the hour. Others weren't so lucky. The frail Dominion, an economic superpower, had long exploited Earth's early colonies for rare minerals. Generations of Terrans had died under their contracts. And when questioned by human envoys in the past, the frail had always smiled and said, "It's just business." Earth hadn't forgotten. One morning, the entire frail banking system collapsed. Not from explosives, not even from direct hacking. Earth simply introduced a new algorithm planted years ago in the Dominion's infrastructure, designed to recognize unethical contracts. The system auto-purged everything tied to those deals. The result? Absolute economic implosion. Ships grounded. Credit networks frozen. The frail stock value went from empire to extinction in 13 seconds. No declaration of war. No threats. Just judgment. Humanity, it seemed, wasn't looking for conquest. They were dismantling a galaxy that had spent centuries pretending to be righteous while living off Earth's back. What the Council couldn't grasp, what terrified them more than any weapon, was that humans weren't asking for anything. They didn't want seats at the table anymore. They wanted to burn the table down. Meanwhile, on Luna Base, deep beneath the surface, Earth's real command center pulsed in silence. The war wasn't being run by politicians or generals. It was being run by the Dirge, a hybrid AI coded not with logic but with memory. Every humiliation, every massacre, every insult Earth had endured in its galactic infancy had been uploaded into the Dirge. It didn't calculate victories. It delivered vengeance. And it was far from finished. Hidden within its neural threads were names, dozens of them. Council members, CEOs, admirals, allies, and collaborators. One by one, they would fall. The Council tried to unify briefly. They attempted a summit on the neutral moon of Varix, inviting every species, even the ones they'd ignored for centuries. Desperation does that. But as the delegates arrived, every screen in the dome blinked to life. No warning, no audio, just a simple video loop, grainy footage, archival Earth from centuries ago. Protesters. Police in riot gear. Smoke grenades. A young girl screaming while clutching her brother's hand as buildings burned behind them. Then a voice, human, female, trembling with rage. "No one came for us. Now we come for you." The screen shattered. Every light went out. And somewhere, buried in the system logs of the Varix dome, a single line of code was found, rewritten in Earth's strange emotional syntax. Forgiveness is a luxury the forgotten cannot afford. By the time the Council realized what Earth was doing, it was already too late. This wasn't war. This was reckoning. The Council's outer colonies began to fold like wet paper. It started small, routine shipments that never arrived, mining stations that stopped responding, data cores corrupted with cryptic messages. But soon it spread. Systems once thought secure were going dark. Civil unrest boiled in the streets of planets that had never known rebellion. Everywhere, people were asking the same question: where are the humans? And worse, what did we do to them? Even species that had no direct history with Earth began feeling the chill. Entire cultures were shutting down interstellar communications, fearing that even acknowledging humanity might make them a target. Universities burned Earth-related archives. Libraries deleted human languages from their records. They were trying to erase the memory of Earth, but Earth remembered everything. Back on Terra, no longer Earth, not to the humans who now operated in its shadow, the people didn't celebrate. They didn't gloat. There was no broadcasted message of victory, no galactic anthem, no conquering general waving a flag. Because what the galaxy never understood was that humans didn't want the stars. They wanted dignity. And when they couldn't get it, they decided to rip it from the bones of the ones who denied it. In a concealed hangar beneath the ice crust of Europa, a group of operatives gathered in silence. No names, no faces, just shadowed minds. They were called the Remnant, made up of humans who had once believed in the Council, diplomats, scientists, former peacekeepers. They had one final task: the list. Not of enemies, but of collaborators. The species and factions who had smiled in Earth's face while twisting the blade behind their back. Those who had offered protection in return for silence. Those who sold out Earth colonies for influence. Those who claimed neutrality while trading information to Earth's oppressors. And one by one, the Remnant made sure their masks came off. In the great bio-cities of the Nishari, exposés began appearing on walls in bright red, classified documents, trade logs, intercepted messages, evidence of their betrayal. Within weeks, the Nishari civil structure collapsed from shame alone, its leaders ousted by their own people. On the orbital spires of Zunker, long thought unreachable, every member of its elite council awoke to find their wealth redistributed, not stolen, but rerouted into the hands of planetary laborers, the untouchables they had exploited for eons. It wasn't an invasion. It was justice coded in fury. Across the galaxy, phrases began to circulate, in whispers, graffiti on walls, muttered among smugglers, etched into the skin of resistance fighters. Terror doesn't scream. It whispers. And then you vanish. In desperation, the council appointed a special envoy to plead for negotiation. He was a respected figure, Athenian known for brokering peace between warring empires. He wore a white robe, brought no guards, and arrived in Earth's system in a single unarmed ship. As his ship approached Earth orbit, the stars around him blinked out one by one. Not literally, but his navigation system failed. His engines reset. His logs corrupted. Then his ship slowly turned itself around, without his command, and accelerated back toward Council space. No words. Earth didn't want apologies anymore. They wanted distance. And still, no human voice had addressed the galaxy since it began. Just silence, strategic, echoing silence that gnawed at the edges of every planetary broadcast. But inside Terra, the dirge was changing, its code evolving, feeding on the galaxy's reaction, adapting to every move the Council made. One of its subroutines, a file named Lazarus Protocol, came online. And that's when the blackout began. All interstellar communication from Council core worlds ceased overnight. No traffic. No signals. No replies. Gone. Entire star systems just dark. At first, no one believed it. Then small vessels were sent to investigate, scouting parties, rescue teams. None returned. And those who escaped the edge of the blackout had nothing to say but this: they weren't destroyed. They were emptied. Cities still stood. Lights still flickered. But no one was there. No bodies. No signs of battle. Just the eerie stillness of worlds stripped clean. And the mark, always the same, spray-painted, etched, or scorched into walls, a red dot in the center of expanding rings. Terra's seal. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson, not in war, not in diplomacy, but in silence. The blackout spread like ink spilled across starlight. Whole systems blinked out with no noise, no fight, no warning. Worlds that once sang with life, now tombs of eerie stillness. And the galaxy, so used to believing in its own superiority, could do nothing but watch in horror. Council officials who once delivered speeches about unity and order now lived underground, speaking only in analog. Even their whispers were brief, panicked, and terrified. Some began to think Earth had tapped into something beyond technology, something personal. Because how else could you explain the precision? Each disappearance wasn't random. It was intimate. Worlds that had enslaved early Terran colonies, gone. Universities that laughed off human research, empty. Media planets that mocked Earth's primitive emotional instability, silenced. It wasn't about power anymore. It was punishment. And for those still untouched, survival meant denial. Species that had once flaunted their place in the Council began burning their own records, swearing they'd always supported Earth. They changed their histories, rewrote their archives, tried to remove their fingerprints from every sin committed under the Council's banner. But the dirge remembered every lie, every vote, every name. The whispers of Earth began to take on a new shape in the Outer Rim colonies, where independent smugglers and rogue traders thrived. There, humanity had always been seen as tough, tenacious, useful in a scrap. Those places started seeing humans not as threats but as legends. Some began marking their ships with the red dot symbol, not to be targeted, but to earn favor. And soon, a rebellion of silence took form, not led by humans, but by those who had watched, suffered, and learned from Earth's pain. Across the trade routes, small systems began declaring themselves neutral of the Council. No official allegiance. No tribute. Some even reopened old Terran embassies that had been shuttered for decades. The Council tried to make examples of them. The first was Furine, rich in metals, loyal for centuries. When its leaders declared neutrality and restored the Terran flag, the Council dispatched warships to make a statement. They never made it. Instead, every screen on every vessel blinked to static mid-flight. Then a phrase appeared in crimson text. You have chosen memory. Now you are marked. The ships never returned. The rebellion grew. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy began to split. Not between species or wealth or ideology, but between those who feared Earth and those who admired it. Not for its strength, but for its clarity. Earth wasn't pretending to be righteous. It didn't claim to be merciful. It made one thing clear. You will never use us again. And those words echoed louder than any supernova. Back on Terra, beneath the fractured remains of the old UN tower, now simply known as the Core, the leaders of the remnant gathered for what might have been the last time. Each of them had scars, some on skin, some buried deep in memory. I think we've done enough, said General Soraya Lark, her voice hoarse with years of silence. They've paid. We've made our point. But across from her, a man named Cato shook his head. No, he said. They haven't learned. They've only feared. He tapped a finger on the console. A new target list appeared, short, only 5 entries. One of them read, Council Prime Public Memory Nexus. Sarah stared. You want to wipe their history? No, Cato replied, standing slowly. We want them to see it. Unfiltered. Raw. Every horror they made us swallow. Every lie they wrapped in peace. We don't delete their legacy. We replace it with truth. And that's when it became clear, Earth didn't want revenge anymore. It wanted witnesses. The galaxy would not forget what it had done because Earth would not let it. In the heart of Council space, on a planet wrapped in gold spires and arrogant peace, the public memory nexus loomed, a monument to galactic history, meticulously curated by centuries of selective truth. Every victory, every declaration, every noble word ever spoken by the Council was stored there in light and crystal. It was the pride of the galaxy, the sanctum of the Council's myth. Children were taught from its archives propaganda dressed as enlightenment. And not a single image of Earth's suffering had ever touched its walls. Until now. It began with a flicker. Just a moment of static during a public tour. A tour guide, mid-sentence, froze as the holographic timeline behind her stuttered, then changed. The Battle of Velar disappeared. In its place, the Cairo Massacre, an event the Council had denied ever happened, a mining colony of 9,000 humans, wiped out for refusing a resource tax. The official record had called it environmental collapse. The new footage showed orbital strikes, screaming children, and soldiers in council armor pulling triggers without hesitation. The footage didn't stop. Room by room, archive by archive, every lie was peeled back. Every cover-up, every betrayal exposed. Executions passed off as peacekeeping. Colonies starved into submission. Experiments conducted under the guise of integration. The galaxy watched in horror as the proud image of unity fractured into a collage of horror. And stamped at the end of every reel was Earth's symbol, a red, expanding rings, one unblinking eye. Then came the voice. Calm, male, human, unapologetic. This is not revenge. This is remembrance. For every Terran child buried in silence, you will learn their names. For every scream you erased, we will make you listen. On Council Prime, riots erupted within hours. Entire buildings were torched by their own citizens. Statues torn down. People who once quoted Council doctrine began to wear Terran symbols. Out of guilt, out of fear, or out of something deeper, recognition. They had all played a part, some directly, others by silence. Suddenly, it wasn't just Earth's war anymore. It was the galaxy's reckoning. Dozens of fringe species, long ignored, long mocked, long oppressed, saw Earth's fury and found the courage to raise their own voices. Broadcasts from rebel planets flooded the channels, each repeating the same mantra, we remember. With terror, and still, Earth remained silent. No flags raised. No fleets dispatched. Just data. Truth became their deadliest weapon. The Council, now fractured beyond repair, called an emergency summit in the ruins of Dryhand's diplomatic station, one of the few structures still untouched by Earth's unseen hand. But even there, paranoia seeped into every corridor. Delegates checked their own comms for Terran implants. Guards eyed each other like strangers. They didn't ask, how do we stop this anymore? They whispered, how much more do they have? The answer came not in a strike, but in a gift. A pod, small, silver, marked only with Earth's symbol, was found drifting near the Council fleet. No signal, no escort, just waiting to be retrieved. They opened it carefully, expecting a bomb. Inside was a sphere, a memory core, one that didn't belong to Earth. It was the Council's, a full backup of their internal archives. The unedited version, logs of secret votes, clandestine orders, classified footage never meant to be seen again. Earth hadn't stolen it. They had simply taken it back. And now they gave it away. Every Council ally received a copy. No demands. No message. Just the truth, gift-wrapped in guilt. What followed was inevitable. Defectors, high-ranking officials fled their posts, joining rebel systems, or disappearing into exile. Some begged Earth for asylum. None were answered. Because Earth didn't negotiate anymore. They revealed. Back on Terra, the Dirge's final subroutine activated, one not designed to attack or destroy or expose. It was named simply Epitaph, and its code was short. One line. One last whisper transmitted only once, on every Council frequency, in every known language. You had your chance to love us. Now you'll never forget us. They called it the Silence Era, not because Earth had gone quiet, but because everyone else did. Trade routes dissolved. Borders blurred. Entire civilizations retreated into themselves, afraid to speak too loudly, to shine too brightly, to be seen. A galaxy once obsessed with display and dominance was now hushed under the weight of one species' cold, surgical memory. And Earth, Terra, didn't celebrate. There were no broadcasts of victory, no humans giving speeches over the bones of their former masters. There was only the continued hum of progress, quiet, relentless, precise. Across Luna's black cities and Mars' scarred surface, factories ran without pause. Not for weapons, not for ships, but for infrastructure. They were building, preparing not to conquer, but to exist without permission. Because that was the lesson. Never again would humanity ask to be part of the galaxy. Never again would they knock on doors that slammed shut in their faces. Now they would build their own door, their own future on their terms. But that didn't mean the rest of the galaxy could forget them. No one could forget the day the suns of the Galaxy twins dimmed, not from attack, but from atmospheric distortion, a silent shift in gravitational fields caused by Terran satellites that had moved in unnoticed, recalibrated solar outputs by less than 0.3%. Not enough to kill, just enough to show they could. The message was always the same, not death, but control. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to remind you that we survived you. The final blow to the Council came not with fire, but with paperwork. Earth transmitted its own charter, a rewritten document titled The Accord of the Broken. It listed every known human colony, every allied rebel planet, every species that had joined or declared solidarity with Terra since the beginning of the conflict. At the bottom, in bold, blood-red lettering, "This is the galaxy as it truly stands. You may recognize it, or you may disappear." Within a cycle, over half of the Council species had signed it, not because they wanted to, but because they no longer believed the Council could protect them. The Council chambers, once filled with glowing diplomats and pompous ceremonial robes, now echoed with emptiness. Shattered glass from broken banners still crunched beneath the feet of the last remaining officials, gray, thin, tired, and desperate. And then a ship arrived. Small, unarmed, human. It docked without resistance. From its hatch stepped a girl, no older than 20. No armor, no weapons, just a dark coat marked with the red dot. She walked into the Council hall alone. No escort, no ceremony. And she said only this: "You don't get to fall. You get to live and live with what you did to us." Then she turned and left. That was it. No ultimatums. No surrender terms. No declaration of victory. Because Earth didn't want to win. They wanted to be remembered. And now they would be, forever. Even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, on moons where no Terran foot had ever touched, children began to draw the red dot on walls. Not in fear, not even in reverence, but as a kind of prayer, a recognition that in the galaxy's cold and sterile order, one species had finally said, "No more." One species had taken centuries of humiliation and forged it into a mirror and forced everyone else to look. And when they did, they didn't see savages. They saw themselves broken, cruel, hypocritical, and judged by the very people they once called emotional primitives. But humans weren't primitive. They were precise. They were patient. They were done begging. The stars no longer whispered about Earth. They spoke its name in full. Terra. Not as a footnote in Council archives, not as a fledgling species granted developmental guidance, but as a force, a memory, a scar burned into the conscience of a galaxy that finally understood the cost of arrogance. Decades passed, but Terra's shadow never lifted. Council Prime became a ceremonial planet, no longer a seat of power, just a relic of pride too wounded to bury itself. It sat like a museum of failure, its empty halls preserved by a handful of keepers too old to flee and too stubborn to forget. The rest of the Council fractured into regional federations, fractured alliances, and cautious neutral zones. No one dared to build empires anymore. The age of centralized power was gone, crushed beneath the weight of the Terran mirror. And still, Earth did not expand. That, perhaps, was the most unnerving part. Humanity didn't swoop in to seize control. They didn't raise banners over the ruins of Council space. They had the means, the technology, the psychological grip, but they never marched forward. They simply endured. Instead of invading, they invested. The broken accord blossomed into an alliance of shared memory, not conquest. Terra offered resources, tech, even culture, but only to those who admitted their role in the past. Forgiveness wasn't granted. It was earned. And many couldn't. Entire systems lived in self-imposed silence. They closed their borders, burned their records, taught their children that Earth was a ghost story, something once wronged, now watching. But some remembered rightly. On a dusty moon named Kais III, a young historian stood in a small, crumbling library. She held a tattered book in her hands, one of the few that had survived the Council's purge after the Silence era began. The pages smelled of smoke and age. On the cover, the Martian hunger riots, a piece of Earth's history that had once been buried in shame, now held with reverence. She turned the page and found a handwritten note scrawled in red ink. It simply read, "They starved us because they thought we'd break. We didn't. We remembered." Tears welled in her eyes. Her ancestors weren't just victims. They were survivors. And now, as Kais III prepared to formally join the Broken Accord, she understood the cost of truth, of choosing to remember instead of forgetting. Elsewhere, on the outer rims, children wore Terran jackets, not because they were fashionable, but because they meant something. They were shields, not of armor, but of meaning, of history, of a choice to stand with those who once had nothing but pain and turned it into purpose. On Terra itself, life went on. Cities rose higher, but without grand speeches or imperial declarations. Music filled the air in the rebuilt streets of Lagos. Drones danced in sky halos over the reclaimed coasts of New Tokyo. Mars thrived, no longer a red graveyard but a green, blooming world of science and soul. And below the surface, the dirge still pulsed, not as a weapon, but as an archive, a living memory. It didn't forget. It didn't forgive, but it remembered for all of them. At the top of the cliffside ruins of the old world, a simple marker stood. No grand monument, no statue of victory, just a small stone bearing the red dot symbol, and beneath it, carved in a dozen Earth languages, a single sentence. Remember who we were, so we never forget who we are. The galaxy had called them savages. History would remember them as teachers.